Before I get into the book that I'm going to be reviewing, I just need to reiterate that this is my opinion. Everyone's opinion is different. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean that you're not going to like something. Now, I have to be honest with you. I did think about fluffing this review a little bit just to be nice to the author, just to continue to support the self-publishing industry. And I really wrestled with the fact that a negative review might really hurt someone's career, especially in the self-publishing space. One negative review can have a lot of negative impacts. And I struggled with that a little bit as I was preparing to rank this book. With that said, this author is more established. They do have a lot of copies sold of their book. And so after a little bit of deliberation, I have decided to just tell you why I couldn't finish this book. Now, the book that I'm referring to is The Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. It's a classic fantasy that follows two young characters, Aram and Marcus, who are bound in an unlikely friendship in a sort of coming-of-age story. One of the characters is potentially one of the most powerful sorcerers in generations, and the other is impervious to magic, so they work together really well. And they've got dragons, and their world is fractured into two planes, a magical and a non-magical. So it does have a good setup for an interesting journey. But for me, again, the promises that this book made just didn't deliver as I was reading through it. And I think part of the problem is this is just such a thick book that you're asking a lot for me to commit to reading this whole thing if I don't feel like the writing resonates with me. You know, when I'm a quarter of, well, maybe not a quarter of the way through, maybe a fifth of the way through. I got about 200 pages in. This book is, 800 pages plus. I did give it a solid try. Dragon Mage felt very similar to Of Blood and Fire, which I didn't particularly enjoy that book. So it might be that that was just fresh on my mind as I started diving into this one, and it just felt so similar that I couldn't bring myself to read the same story twice. So I'm just going to quickly go through my indie rankings, just from the 20% of the book that I read. So the immersion, the world building was very shallow, very typical classic fantasy, so there wasn't a lot of things that stood out, other than maybe the split world aspect, but even then, it just didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel connected to the importance of this separation of the worlds. So it has potential. Maybe it gets better, but I wasn't feeling it. I just didn't see the depth of this world. I feel like this author just wrote that there were two different worlds, but didn't give any depth to it. And the characters had a lot of potential, but ultimately the dialogue for me was so bad I couldn't get through it, to be quite frank. The characters themselves have just very shallow personalities. They have very basic character traits. One is supposed to be neurodivergent, but sometimes he's very aware of his surroundings. Other times he acts like he doesn't understand basic sentences. Marcus, who's supposed to be a hero, is just doing things for the sake of doing them. It doesn't feel like he actually cares about Aram. It just feels like he's doing them because that's what a heroic character is supposed to do. Like, there's no reason for Marcus to really like Aram. They've never done that much together. Now, to illustrate what I find annoying with dialogue, or what will take me out of this experience as a reader, I'm just going to read you a couple of clips from this book. In this part of the story, we're on page 69. Marcus is the one who's impervious to magic. They have just seen this dragon thing try and take Aram away. So he has seen this dragon, he's heard this dragon creature called a Thurling, and right now they're in a town hall. Marcus asks, "What was that thing?" Master Ibra, which is the bard, his gaze drifted away and for a moment became haunted and distant. At first, Marcus didn't think he was going to answer, but then the bard brought up his hand and, rubbing his eyes, admitted it was an Aetherling, though most people just call them Thurlings. Marcus stared at him hard a long moment before finally asking, "Where did it come from?" Even this clip, this isn't even the point I'm trying to make, but even this clip is just very tell instead of show with the dialogue.
What is that thing?
It's an Aetherling.
Where did it come from?
It came from the Netherworld.
What does it do?
That's just so boring. That dialogue is so boring. I don't like it. There needs to be different questions than the basic first questions that come to mind. Or the bard needs to not answer the questions because he's worried about a zillion other things that are going on. But that's not the point I make. So now I'm going to skip ahead. Now we're on page 118. Long story short, they get captured by another mage who wants to basically steal Aram's powers, okay? So completely different person. But Marcus is still there, and Marcus is the one asking this question. That's very important. So these Thurlings break free of their barriers between the worlds because of whatever circumstances, and they're now chasing Marcus and Aram because they are drawn to Aram. Listen to what Marcus asks. What are they? Marcus asked. Are you kidding me? He already asked that question 30 pages ago. He's forgotten, but here's there's more. Sergen, again, who's a completely different character he's supposed to be evil, the bard was supposed to be good. You'd think they'd have different answers or different characteristics. No. Sergen glanced back over his shoulder, but not at Marcus. Instead, he seemed to be watching for something behind them. Aetherlings, creatures that inhabit the void between worlds. Like, you're literally... That is such a dull character. You're answering the question in the exact same way with this guy who's supposed to be evil. Why doesn't the guy just tell him to shut up and sit down and to stop worrying about him, to listen to his instructions? Instead, he's explaining this thing to some kid he doesn't care about. That's crazy to me. It just has no character depth to it whatsoever. And that happens over and over and over again in this first chunk where I just could not handle it anymore. It was too frustrating for me as a reader, and I had to put it down. I could not do it. I could not read one more page of just flat dialogue, flat characters, boring, stereotypical world. I was done. I couldn't finish it. I guess we'll go through the whole thing, but that was really the breaking point. The fact that it wasn't as immersive as I was hoping it would be, and the characters weren't very interesting. Those two things for me are big. So if you have great characters and a weak plot, I will like your book probably. So make your characters good and I will like it. If your characters are boring, I will probably set the book down at this point. So the magic was a typical magic system. Again, I didn't get to see the full depth of how this magic worked, other than the fact that people that wield magic can have someone who's impervious to magic, and together they can work together to solve problems. That's kind of cool, I guess. The plot was actually probably fine. It was following the typical conventions of a plot. And this is where I sometimes feel like with indie authors, you need to choose if you want to write something passionately or if you want to check all the boxes. Because there are so many people on the internet that will tell you exactly how to plot a story, and they'll have a 10-point plan or a 5-point, arc that you need to hit for all of your characters. And it's so plotted out and it's so mapped out and so predictable that when I read the stories, it feels like you just looked at that chart and you put it on the page and you didn't put any other thought or any other passion into the project. Where I've read books that have not that good of plots. Honestly, Kings of Paradise didn't have a great plot. The two main POVs don't even really ever interact with each other. I don't care, because both of those POVs were very engaging and interesting to me. It was like getting two separate books in one. I'm okay with that if the plot doesn't quite follow the traditional dynamic. I'm okay with that. So yeah, the book so far was following the traditional plot scheme. Who cares? Obviously, my enjoyment was like a 0 out of 10. Like, I can just say that right now. I just did not enjoy reading this book. Every time I picked it up, it was a struggle to get through the pages. I couldn't wait to put it down. I dreaded picking it back up. And if that's what this experience is going to be for me, that's not worth it to me. I want to spend my time reading books that I enjoy and that leave me fulfilled and satisfied. I'm not going to waste my time on books that are just this frustrating when I can see clear problems, especially with the character work. In this case, I don't think you can judge a book by its cover, because the cover is awesome and the book wasn't. Design was great. I hate that the design was great because it felt deceptive. The map was fine. The formatting and everything is good. I know this is kind of a bummer video. In the indie fantasy club, I don't like to disparage indie authors, but I have to be honest. This channel, if I give good reviews to everyone, how will you be able to trust whatever I'm reviewing? I need to be able to give some contrast of books that I don't like so that you can gauge if I'm a good person to listen to for book reviews. I hope that you can change my mind in the comments if you thought that you enjoyed this book. Tell me some redeeming qualities about it, why I should keep reading, and I might consider it. I do have a long TBR, so I might not consider it for a while, but you could try. And be sure to check out the other book reviews to see, again, if that matches with your reading style. And I'm also creating a video series that goes through my indie rankings and what I personally look for when I'm ranking these books. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to join the Indie Fantasy Club so you never miss an indie review. I'll see you next time.